We'll call to order the Regional Planning Commission at Washoe County Chambers, July 27th, 2023 meeting. Can we have the roll call, please?
Yeah, Shelley Reed, absent. Francine Donchik, also absent. Harris Armstrong for Peter Gower.
Present.
Mark Johnson.
Here.
Marilyn Kramer.
Here.
Kate Nelson.
Here.
Pat Phillips.
Here.
Evan Pritzos.
Here.
And Alex Velto.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
And today we will be doing the election of officers. The first election will be for the chair, and it will be someone from the city of Sparks. I am looking for a nomination.
Madam Chair, I would like to nominate Shelley Reed as chair for this coming year.
And do we have a second?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I'll second that.
Okay. Do we have to do a vote? Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Moving on to the election for the vice chair. This will be coming from a person from the city of Reno. Do we have anyone for nominating?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I'd like to nominate Alex Velto for Vice Chair.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kramer, I will second that nomination.
All right, we have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, moving on to item 3. Commissioner Phillips, will you lead us in a pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to item number 4. It's the approval of the agenda. I would actually like to pull items 7B and 7C from the agenda since we kind of have a few missing commissioners and our commission is in flux at this time. We would like to move it to the August meeting. Does anyone have any issues with that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I move to approve the agenda with the removal of item 7B and item 7C.
Okay.
Commissioner Velto, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the meeting with items 7B and 7C removed in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, that passes. We'll move on to item 5, public comment. Do we have any public comment?
We've received none.
Okay. Item 6, approval of the minutes. Is there any discussion or do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kramer, I would recommend that we approve the minutes of June 22nd, 2023 of the Regional Planning Commission meeting.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Armstrong, point of order. Am I able to vote on the minutes as an alternate, or would I abstain?
Madam Chair, Jessica Prenti, Legal Counsel. I recommend you abstain, Commissioner Armstrong.
Thank you. I'll be abstaining.
Thank you.
With that, I'll also have to abstain because I was not in attendance at the meeting.
All right.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I'll second the motion.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve, a motion to second. Any further discussion? Can we have all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Moving on to the general business items, the business of the day. Could we have the information on item 7A?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Jeremy Smith for the record. Today we are very happy to be joined from the Southeast by Kyle West, our former commissioner, and we're going to read his resolution of appreciation into the record and then give folks a chance to talk with Kyle. So I'll start that. It's resolution number 23-06, resolution of appreciation for the service of Kyle West on the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Commission. Whereas Kyle West served as a member of the Regional Planning Commission from January 2021 to April 2023, representing the city of Sparks. And whereas Kyle West, through his service, always sought to advance the quality of life for residents of the Truckee Meadows. And whereas Kyle West endorsed the efforts of TMRPA in moving towards increasingly data-driven, thoughtful analysis for public and private decision makers, and was continually committed to supporting comprehensive and innovative approaches for planning in our region. And whereas Kyle West consistently participated in thoughtful deliberations regarding the many reports and technical initiatives undertaken at TMRPA, such as the Consensus Forecast, Truckee Meadows Annual Report, the Natural Resources Plan and Public Infrastructure Plan initiatives, and other efforts that address land use planning in the Truckee Meadows. And whereas Kyle West has long served the region as a professional engineer, having worked with the City of Reno in addition to serving on the Sparks Planning Commission. And whereas Kyle West was always prepared with discerning and insightful questions and comments on items at Regional Planning Commission meetings and was committed to perpetuating good planning in the Truckee Meadows region. And whereas Kyle West's professional experience as an engineer underpinned his position on the commission, and that was apparent in his advocacy for TMRPA's public infrastructure plan effort. And whereas Kyle West always treated staff with a great deal of respect and appreciation and provided constructive feedback to enhance the program of regional planning, now therefore be it resolved that Kyle's colleagues on the Regional Planning Commission and TMRPA staff express their gratitude to Mr. West for his conscientious public service to the Regional Planning Commission. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Thank you very much. Would any of the commissioners like to say a few words? I'll go first. Thank you, Kyle, for serving. I appreciated listening to you and learning from you. Hope you enjoy your new digs in Georgia.
We can't hear you, Kyle. Kyle, you're not coming through. I think you're still muted on the Zoom, Kyle. Sorry. Darn it, we should have brought the TMRPA semaphore flags.
Oh, 1 minute. There he is.
Kyle, you've joined the meeting. Oh, there you go.
There.
There it is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
I apologize for that. I don't know. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hello?
Much better.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. I apologize for that. I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, yes, I really appreciate the recognition. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure serving with all of you and serving as a representative of the City of Sparks on the Regional Planning Commission. We definitely enjoyed our time in the Truckee Meadows, and we've got our new digs here in Georgia. We live about 3 miles from our daughter and her family. That's working well, and I'm really enjoying my job. But again, I just want to thank all of you for this recognition and wish all of you good luck as well.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Really appreciate you joining us tonight for the meeting. Thank you, and for all of your service.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. With that, we will move on to item 7D.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Director Smith. For the record, item 7D is a public hearing. It's a regional plan conformance review for City of Reno project of regional significance for the Fire Creek Crossing, hotel casino. Nate Kusha will take us through.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Nate Kusha, Team RPA. As Director Smith mentioned, this is a conformance review for a project of regional significance for the Fire Creek Crossing project in the City of Reno. So as mentioned multiple times now, this is a project of regional significance, and that is for triggering the being over 938 employees, as well as greater than 6,250 average daily trips for traffic. Regional planning staff does recommend that this project does conform with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan. So this project is a project of regional significance. The threshold that triggers for employees, as mentioned, was 938 employees. The projected employees for this project are about 1,003. Additionally, as mentioned, 6,250 average daily trips is our traffic trigger for APRS. This project, from a traffic study, has estimated 11,224 average daily trips. As you can see on the map here on the right, this is totally within the mixed-use core regional land designation, and it's at the intersection of Kitsky and South Virginia Lane there, right across from the Reno Sparks Convention Center. So policy RC9, hopefully most of you know, but we'll go over quickly because we have some new faces. It identifies the 5 factors that the RPC must consider when evaluating for conformance. And those are our 5 policy sections of population growth, regional form, public facilities and services, natural resources, and regional coordination. So for population growth, as this project is a commercial use, rather, it includes no change to projected housing capacities. So therefore conforming with this policy section. Moving on to regional form. So as mentioned, this project does lie entirely within the mixed use core regional land designation. And the materials indicate that the floor area ratio of the proposal will be 1.32, which does meet the minimum for this regional land designation or tier, which is a 0.25 floor area ratio. Additionally, the proposed hotel and casino is compatible with the surrounding commercial land uses and will support the Reno Sparks Convention Center, which, as you can see on the map here, is right across the street there. Existing facilities and services for the project are in close proximity, and the applicant is required to complete all off-site improvements necessary to meet the capacity demands of the project. The City of Reno has also imposed a variety of conditions, and many of these are in order to ensure proper stormwater and wastewater planning for the project, as well as to enhance public transportation infrastructure along South Virginia Street. For natural resources, the subject site is largely in a built-out area, as you know, in that site there, and so there were minimal impacts to natural resources identified. Additionally, the project is conditioned to provide electric vehicle charging stations, and this supports Regional Plan Policy NR11, which is air quality, as well as requiring low-impact development concepts to be incorporated in landscape areas, which supports Regional Plan Policy NR14. Finally, our regional coordination section. Of course, we have our policy RC9 here, which is our review criteria that is in effect with this case. Additionally, as with all cases, we make sure to coordinate with all entities involved in the process throughout the development review process to make sure we're all working together. So we found no issues with that policy section. So with that, there's a proposed motion on the screen. Myself, as well as City of Reno staff, are available for any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Before we go to discuss this item or ask any questions, are there any disclosures from any of the commissioners? All right, I will open it up to questions from any of the commissioners. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Oh, sorry, we have to go to public comment.
No worries, there is none for this item.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I will make a motion. Let's see if it's the same thing. I move to find that the Fire Creek Crossing project of regional significance is in conformance with the 2019 regional plan based on the findings listed in the staff report.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Armstrong, I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Moving on to the next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Smith again for the record. Item 7E is a public hearing item as well. It's a regional plan conformance review for the Washoe County Master Plan Amendment and a project of regional significance for the Village Green Commerce Center. Chris Tolley will take us through this one.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Tolley, Team RPA. This item is a conformance review of the Village Green Amendment to the Washoe County Master Plan, Spanish Springs Area Plan, and also a project of regional significance. So as noted, this is a request for an amendment to the Spanish Springs Area Plan to change the land use from commercial to industrial for the subject parcels, and to add the subject parcels to the Village Green Commerce Center specific plan boundary, and to modify additional text components of that specific plan. The approximately 18.954 acre site and specific plan boundary are both located in Tier 2 of the Truckee Meadows service area. And the subject parcels and specific plan boundary are located southeast of the Pyramid Highway and Calle de la Plata intersection. And finally, regional planning staff recommends that the amendment conforms to the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan. To continue with the overview, as noted, the subject parcels are proposed to change from commercial to industrial, which you can see on the included map, as well as the map shows the proposed change to the specific plan boundary, which you can see the parcels on the western portion of this would be added to the Village Green Center Commerce Center specific plan, which is outlined in the white as it's shown there. And then finally, the proposal is also being considered as a project of regional significance for having the effect on the region of increasing employment by not less than 938 employees. Given that the subject parcels are proposed to be added to the Village Green specific plan, that will increase the potential employment for this area, this specific plan area, to be above the PRS threshold of 938 employees. And the final bit of overview, the additional modifications to the specific plan include updating references to subject parcels being included again in the boundary of that, and updating the setbacks to account for the parcels being adjacent to Pyramid Highway. And finally, the materials submitted and identify that the zoning is proposed to change from neighborhood commercial to industrial. And then as Nate showed on the previous item, policy RC9 of the 2019 regional plan sets the review criteria for conformance, and those criteria sections are listed on this policy. We'll go over the analysis presented in the staff report on the following slides. Regarding population growth, this request does not include any residential density modification, so not an issue for that particular section. And regarding regional form, the proposal will reduce the amount of commercially designated land in the immediate vicinity of the from approximately 35.36 acres to 16.41 acres. However, there is commercially designated land to the north and south of this area. The proposal also includes increasing the Village Green specific plan boundary to include land use amendment parcels noted above. The existing specific plan area has been planned for industrial uses since 2009. Considering this, no impacts to regional form. Considering both these items, no impacts to regional form have been identified. Moving on to public facilities and services. The proposed amendment to change from commercial to industrial is anticipated to result in a decrease or no change in terms of wastewater generation potential for the site. And then also, considering the limited size of the land use amendment parcels and the change from commercial to industrial, the overall impact of transportation facilities is anticipated to be reduced or remain unchanged. Then to move on to natural resources, a review of the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan, Map 4, Development Constraints Area, identified that the land use amendment parcel does not contain any identified DCA features or development constraints area features. Just highlight that part. And then finally, regional coordination. The regional coordination section, regarding regional coordination, regional planning staff sent an initial review memorandum for this case to Washoe County during their request for comments period, as required by policy RC5 of the regional plan. In general, this section's policies describe intergovernmental coordination, annexations, spheres of influence, and implementation of the plan. Applicable policies of this section include policy RC6, which is the project of regional significance policy, and RC9, which is the review criteria policy. And then finally, coordination is at the forefront of Team RPA's work just in general. And then finally, the proposed motions, which are listed on page 69 of the packet. This does conclude my presentation. However, Team RPA staff and Washoe County staff are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any disclosures from the commission? Seeing none. Do the commissioners have any questions of staff?
Madam Chair, I do have a question for staff. Just to attempt to understand, so just following along, so we have an existing, essentially a land use and, we have an existing Village Green project. We are adding square footage to that, and that, because of the overall potential employment from that has pushed it into a PRS. So the original Village Green did not require a PRS, is that correct?
Correct on both counts.
Okay, so then I guess my follow-up to that is are we looking at it as a PRS because some of the rest of your discussion talked about how the actual master plan amendment is going to be potentially reducing traffic with this. So I guess I don't necessarily have an issue with it. I'm just trying to understand how we've created a PRS for something that in essence sounds like it's actually reducing the potential for traffic issues. It's just because we're combining it into the larger entity of the Village Green
Yes.
unit.
And when you do the calculation, basically looking at the change in total employment from commercial to industrial and then lumping that in with the total figure of the existing Village Green, that's where that math ends up resulting in it exceeding the 938. And I think it's over 1,000 approximately. But we're looking at those two together because that parcel did have more potential employment looking at it as commercial, or that set of three parcels, but not considering those together with the existing Village Green Center specific plan, that math didn't exceed the threshold standard.
Okay.
So
I'm tracking now. So it essentially, the only reason if this was just a master plan amendment and it wasn't being included into the Village Green specific plan district, it wouldn't entail PRS. But because it's becoming part of that overall handbook, the overall handbook now and all of that entity is being subject to the PRS review that staff did.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
And we pointed that, just to build off that point, we pointed that out to staff when we were going through the previous amendment, which was at the beginning of this year. So I think we made that note, and possibly in the initial review memo that we sent to them, or a revised version. So anyway.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Madam Chair, no further questions.
Thank you. Any others? Do we have any public comment on this item?
We have received none for this item.
Okay. Do we have any more discussion, or I'll entertain a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion. You want two separate motions, correct? Okay, so for the master plan amendment, I move to find the Village Green amendment to the Washoe County Master Plan in conformance with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based upon the findings listed in the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, moving on to the project of regional significance.
Madam Chair, I'll continue on. project of regional significance, I move to find the Village Green project of regional significance in conformance with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based on the findings listed in the staff report, and I appreciate staff's explanation of how we got to this point. So thank you.
Thank you for that motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that as well.
Seeing that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? All right, that'll close out that item, and we will go on to item 7F.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 7F is a report from staff on a possible approval of the 2022 Truckee Meadows annual report. We have Shawnee Sousa who's going to take us through the annual report website.
All right. Hi, everyone. Shawnee Sousa, TMRPA for the record. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the TMAR, and then we'll go into each of the sections and a little bit of background. So the requirements for annual reporting come from NRS, which requires each local government and affected entity to submit a report to the RPC and RPGB by April of each year. This coordinated annual reporting program helps with gathering data to show how the region is performing with our regional plan. So to start, we customarily have 5 sections, but this year we added a 6th, which is housing. So we have population, dwelling units, housing, land use, employment, and then the summaries. So scrolling to our first section here, and just so you get a little preview, here's our population breakdown by jurisdiction. And if you hover, later you can check this out yourself, but you get to see a little bit more specifically what you would like to look at. Then looking at population growth over time, if you wanted to just look at Washoe County or just Sparks or just Reno, you're able to do that as well. And as you can see for this graph, as we go through each of the years, we're steadily increasing. And in 2022, we did see a pretty big jump. Scrolling down a little further, how we're forecasted to grow over the next 20 years. This is also included in our Washoe County consensus forecast. And right now, our average growth rate is 0.92%. And here's a little highlight on demographics as well. Next are dwelling units, and for this section, we have both jurisdictionally and by tier. And on the right for this one, you can see that Tier 2 has been pretty consistently higher over the years, but then you see a jump in 2020 with the mixed-use core, and Tier 1 is steadily increasing as well. Down here is pretty cool. You get to see it a little bit more by type of units, so single-family and multifamily dwelling units. So for example, when you look at mixed-use core, Tier 1 and Tier 2, you can see that increase from 2021 to 2022 in multifamily. And that carries over when you look at the jurisdictional side as well, from Reno and Sparks, which is highlighted in yellow. Next is housing, which is our newer section, and this is focused on Washoe County. For this, we had been part of the Regional Strategy for Housing Affordability in 2019, so we thought this was an important section to include, and we also want to build upon it in the coming years. So first is the median home sales price. From 2020 to 2021 is where you can see the most significant increase, and then it keeps on going up to 2022. Then we have the average rental price for 2 bedrooms, and that's around a little under $1,400. For our median income, this was about $7,500, just a little less. And then you can also compare the percentage of those who rent versus those who owned. So we have rent, which is about 42%, and own, which is about 58%. We also included vacancy rate by dwelling unit. As you can see, that's decreasing a bit over the years. And the average apartment vacancy rate, which is 2.95%. We also have this, which leads to our housing tracker, our affordable housing tracker. So we went over that last meeting, so I'm not going to cover that this time. Then we have land use. This is also broken down by jurisdiction as well as by tier. And you can also go into more of how it's distributed. So if it's multifamily, commercial, industrial, public facility, and highlight each of those to see those specific numbers once again. Then we have our regulatory project counts. You can also look at master plans that have occurred or PRSs, as well as the acreage with the master plan land use changes since 2018. Then this is our last interactive section. This is employment, which is at 1.05%, steadily increasing as well. And this gets further broken down by looking at the covered employment in Washoe County by industry. And when you do this, you can look at 2022 or 2021 and get a good comparison. And as we were taking a look at the numbers, you can see that there's an increase in construction, manufacturing, transportation and warehousing, let's see, healthcare and social assistance, and then accommodation and food services. And if you remember over the past couple of years, we actually saw a decline in accommodation and food services, probably from COVID, of course. So it's nice to see that coming up. And then last is our summaries. So we took the reports that were submitted to us from each of the jurisdictions and the other entities, and we tried to summarize that as best we could, but we also have it available if you guys want to dive in a little deeper to look at those reports. And that about covers it. Let me know if you have any questions, or Jeremy.
Thank you. I actually love that because there's a lot of information in there and it's very well presented. It's easy to get around and find what you're after. So, anybody else, commissioners? Questions,
Madam Chair.
comments?
Yeah, I just want to say, this is really cool, very well done, and I was just gone on the website as you were showing us this. This is really well done. Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah.
All right, we can go ahead and move on to item.
We actually need to move to approve
Oh,
that one.
all right. So we do need to vote on that. I would be entertaining a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I will move to approve the presentation of the 2022 Truckee Meadows Annual Report.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Armstrong, I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. All right, now on to 7G.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Director Smith again for the record on the 7G. We wanted to give you guys an update of how we're doing on the public infrastructure plan. And so Chris and I are going to tag team this presentation. He's going to start us out, and we'll take you through a few slides that we recently showed to the builders.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Tolley, Team RPA. So yeah, as Jeremy mentioned, we gave this presentation yesterday. So this is a pared down version of the 40-minute, about 40 minutes, I think is what it was, version of the presentation. I recognize that we have a lot of new commissioners sitting here, so maybe we'll try to hit on some of the points, like I'll kick it off with a policy reference in the regional plan. But we've been working on this thing for, almost since the 2019 regional plan was updated. And about a year ago, we brought Mark, when he was the chair, I guess it was a little over a year, brought him in to talk to him about about what we were doing with the public infrastructure plan that was just in our office at a lunch kind of thing. But yeah, we've been working on it for a while and happy to have it officially kicked off, I believe, it was April, I think is when it was. So anyways, the public infrastructure plan, hopping in. So the policy requirement that's in the regional plan is policy PF3, which requires that we do this. And that was, going back to the 2019 regional plan update, that was something that staff, regional planning staff, as well as jurisdictional staff, as well as the composure of the RPC at that point in time and the Regional Planning Governing Board thought that this was an excellent thing that we need to do to continue to up our game with regards to public infrastructure. So this document and the effort it's basically organizing our understanding of public facilities and infrastructure. And that is done more or less through the public infrastructure data that we gather as part of our processes, as well as the capital improvement plan data, both data points. So those, we are actively out there gathering and have been for a few years now and turning that into usable information. And that really informs our regional coordination, which is kind of our regulatory function. It's a combination of multiple things, but that becomes the shared understanding for us as staff here at Regional Planning, as well as staff of the jurisdictions, as well as members of the public, as well as regional planning commissioners, appointed and elected officials can use as part of the overall process that we'll get a little bit further into. So the NRS mandate, one of the things that we did in the 2019 regional plan was to reground the regional plan in NRS. We won't go through this in depth, but if you look through this, if you want to go on and check out the statutes, you can see the relation to what we've got identified in the regional plan. That is available, projected necessity and availability of public facilities and the things that are listed in there: water, wastewater, transportation, schools, flood, stormwater. We won't go in depth, but that's certainly out there for you to take a look at. So what we have in the regional plan is grounded in NRS. So to go in a little bit more depth, and this was a part of two of the items we presented tonight, the conformance reviews. And this is policy PF1, which sets the region-wide infrastructure standards. That is, again, grounded in NRS, and that includes water, wastewater, stormwater flood control, transportation, roads, and schools. And when we're looking at these things, in terms of the lens of the regional plan, it really is, it is the availability and adequacy. This is part of the cases we looked at tonight, the availability and adequacy of these domains, these 5 domains, or if they're planned within a 10-year time frame, or if they're on, if a developer is responsible for putting them in as part of a master plan policy. So we've got the link from NRS to our plan and the lens at the regional level that we're looking at these 5 domains. So that was a little bit of the setup. So we're getting into the actual document, and you guys have already seen the draft goals. Most of you, anyway, have seen them. So this first goal is to basically create the document, and we'll just go straight into it. The document will introduce, and I already kind of touched on this, will introduce the public infrastructure in terms of the regional plan. So the things that are listed in PF1, the availability and adequacy of the public infrastructure, particular domain. And also, we envision there being 5 chapters that will address each of these domains. And this will be something of a reference document in that we're not going to be recreating all the information that would go into a water section, because we have the Western Regional Water Commission that has their own document. So this document would point to that, as well as the scene for water, or the scene for wastewater. And then we have the 2 comparisons here, which kind of shows the type of information that we're really looking to represent. And that would be a comparison between Tumma, and you can see their service boundary as well as the outline of the Truckee Meadows service area. That's the top graphic. And then the bottom one is the wharfs, the water reclamation facility boundaries. So you can see, whereas water's got a little bit more, including some of the other providers and private, but we have a lot more wharfs or reclamation facilities in the region. So we're going to list in the document the who, what, when, where, and why of public infrastructure, again, at the regional level, not the nitty-gritty detail that the individual entity would be creating as part of their own processes.
Jeremy Smith for the record. Thank you, Chris. You could be my slide presser, I guess, if you don't mind. So goal 2, building on that, is, obviously we want to have this organizing document, but we want to have a foundation of data and information so that we can, provide that understanding. And so goal 2 is really about coalescing public facility and infrastructure data. Next, please. So we just went through and saw the annual report, which is really cool. It's another place where we're asking for data, and we've tried to basically repurpose this ask. The state law says, hey, jurisdictions and affected entities, give us a summary report of what you've done. But we figured at the same time to sort of hopefully minimize the number of asks for things that we do to the local jurisdictions, to at that time kind of get into this mode of annually refreshing the public infrastructure data. So for example, if we're asking TUMWA for that report, we would also ask them for the time for a refresh of their pipe data, their lift station data, their fee areas, anything we're using as part of the set of data to support this, and the same for the other 5 domains. So we're really trying to increase the consistency of the process, and therefore the consistency and reliability of the data that's underpinning this effort and our decision making. Likewise, one more ask, because we just want to keep asking for stuff, is that we also, at the same time, are asking for information about capital improvement programs. So that's another thing that comes out of state law, that Team RPA is asked to summarize capital improvement programs, and that's something that we're really trying to build capacity to do. And so at the time we ask for the annual report, we're asking for the GIS data, we're also asking for the approved CIP at that time, or when that will be approved, and grab that, but also a retroactive look at the last year and what was actually achieved in terms of the CIP. So what projects were built, how much did they cost, where did they occur? And the idea being that we'll be able to take all of this information and data and spatially represent it in a way that can be comparative, so we can learn, are we spending money where we say we're spending it, or where we want to spend it rather? Is it in lockstep with where we're seeing growth? Just kind of have that sort of amount of information available to us as we move forward and we continue to grow. Next, please. So just to give you a kind of a heads up to what some of this stuff might look like, it looks like spaghetti, right? But basically, it's tons of different pieces of data, things like transit routes, school locations, water pipes, parcels on septic, you name it. Anything that we can find that's available and kept up by the jurisdictions or affected entities in those 5 infrastructure and public facility domains that Chris mentioned. And that's how we've organized this map document. And this is really for internal use. This is not something we're going to publish out there on the web or anything. In fact, we're going to take this information, and I'll show you in a second. We have this hexagon framework, which I think some of you folks are already familiar with. But we conflate the data, or we just basically push the line or point or polygon data that comes from all of the different providers into that hexagon framework. They're all 40 acres in size, and that allows us to be able to compare things spatially across the region, and also anonymizes it to some degree as well, keeps it a little safe. So next, please. So we've used data like this in the past, and I think, so we've done this ask, and we've gone to Tumwas of the world and the sewer folks and the school district and gotten information. It just has never really had the consistency. It's been more associated with projects like the housing study we did, or industrial land needs project, or anytime we're doing the consensus forecast spatial disaggregation, where we're putting building units and building population out onto the future landscape. We're asking for refreshes of the data at that time so we can be up to snuff on what we're doing. But rather than have to just sort of haphazardly asked, we've built in this consistency component. So that's how, looking forward, we'll continue to use it in a very similar fashion. If we go to the next slide, you can see that hexagon framework that I was talking about. So the shape is generally the TMSA, and there's 2 varieties here, and this you can read about more in the regional plan in chapter 2 if you'd like to. But the point here is that we created 2 surfaces, 2 kind of assumption surfaces. The one on the left is based on proximity to infrastructure data, like we were just looking at. So how close are you to big water mains and sewer, mains, or trunk infrastructure and major roads and whatever else we considered in that surface. And then the bluer the color is, the more suitable, if you will, in terms of that set of assumptions a given area is for development. And so if there's vacant parcels in there, or parcels that are likely to redevelop, or something that's going to absorb future units, this is going to drive the hierarchy of how those parcels are selected to fill in that 20 years. That's one set of assumptions. On the right, we have a different set of assumptions. Could be some of the same data. It looks like pretty different data to me, though. It's the transit routes, density of amenities to like restaurants, entertainment, that sort of thing. Just distance to the core, I believe, was part of that one. Really kind of an infill-focused set of assumptions. And so what we were doing here is we were imagining different futures, right, based on different assumptions of what might be a driver or a preference, and then looking at the resultant build out and seeing, how are they differential? Some impacts are shared across scenarios. Other impacts are scenario specific. So it just gives us the ability to regionally compare where all of this stuff is, where we're growing, where we're planning to put public facilities, where we might have mismatches, where we've got, we've got great school capacity here, but we don't have wastewater capacity. Those kinds of interactions are what we're trying to look for regionally. So that's the hexagon framework. Next slide, please. And so how we're going to use it, obviously we're going to use it on our spatial disaggregation so that we're working on that this year. That's coming, the regional transportation plan is getting refreshed. It's, I think, a 4-year cycle, so that's happening now. And we provide the socioeconomic data based on this kind of modeling work of where we think future growth will occur. And then part of that will be scenario building. They're looking to do some scenarios, so we're going to help them with that. And I think we'll be looking in our regional plan update process at this kind of information and looking at how the actual growth we've seen compares to the scenarios that we built. That's going to be a really interesting analysis. But basically, it's going to allow us to have better understanding as we put this data together, keep it consistent, keep it organized. We're always going to have at our fingertips, and so will everyone else, the access to this data. And if you want more information, we'll have in our document where to go to get finer grained detail. So it's really going to become something that informs our cases and a resource for the community. Next slide, please. Back to Chris.
So goal 3, design and implement policy improvements to the 2019 regional plan based on narrative description and data compilation in advance of the 2024 regional plan update. And this is really deploying the information that we've built, information and processes we've built in the first two goals into really two different regulatory portions. That would be the policy thing, which would be updates to the regional plan, as well as cases. We'll look at cases on the following slide. So the policy improvements we envision at this point in time would be an update to PF1. We already talked about that quite a bit tonight, as well as the tiers. And that would be, in terms of the tiers, the public infrastructure, the tiers are partly based on public infrastructure, our understanding currently. So as we're building through the collection of data and working with staff of the local jurisdictions, building a greater understanding of where the public infrastructure exists, that would lead to enhancements or improvements to the tiers based off of that information. So not saying one way or another tier, everything's going to go to tier 1 or the mixed use core, but the appropriate tier is what is a long-held idea that would result from this process, as well as establishing processes for the infrastructure data collection. That could be capital improvements as well. I mean, I think staff has long thought there wouldn't be any crazy additions in terms of policies, but trying to include processes that we would carry out through the TMAR so that members of the public and staff are available or not are knowledgeable as to what those are. And then this effort, as far as the second bullet's concerned, it's more or less a feasibility study at a macro level, collecting the public infrastructure information, building that up so that we have an understanding, maybe not a parcel level, but something above that as to how an area should be developed in terms of the public infrastructure. And then the last bullet on here, informed planning decisions. This is also, I think, a long-held belief that, and kind of the reason for including PF3 and the creation of this effort is to better link or connect the decision-making process between planning and public infrastructure. And this effort we see as absolutely doing that. And then to talk a little bit about the cases, again, we saw 2 cases tonight. The overall case flow, which we'll just kind of walk through. We get requests for comments from the jurisdictions. And as part of the upfront or the initial review memo that we've also talked about for both of them, we would send out our understanding of public infrastructure based off of the data that we have. And that would more or less seed the jurisdictional process. So if we recognize, let's say that there is, just for example, that there might be a sewer issue in a particular area, that is something that we would highlight in our initial review memo, send that to the jurisdiction, and then they would, I guess, internalize that into their own process, their analysis, and represent that in the staff report if that was appropriate. They finish their process, and then it comes back to us, and we use our information again to check that the jurisdictional process was addressed what we had wanted, as well as if there's any updates. Let's say that it took a year or so for a case to be realized. Well, there might be updated information that we could use as part of that process. And then finally, regional coordination. So we made this, the little puzzle on the upper right-hand portion as part of, multiple years ago, I think it was 2018. But this shows the puzzle. All these entities listed on here aren't necessarily going to provide data for public infrastructure, but it's the concept that we're trying to put together the puzzle pieces for public infrastructure to a greater degree than they are currently together in one place, hopefully. And then we see ourselves as the 30,000-foot eye in the sky. So this public infrastructure effort will help up our game again in this area and establish feedback processes that will benefit not only us here, but benefit jurisdictional staff as well as members of the public, appointed elected officials. So the process that supports consistency, again, Jeremy mentioned that earlier, is the annual data request, which leads to the creation of the spatial information, which leads to the deployment of that information in our processes, the initial review memo that we talked about, as well as our casework, as well as the jurisdictions and the entities having that available to them. And then finally, coordinating information sharing to optimize planning. I mean, that's kind of what this is, another portion of what this is trying to do, so that we could provide regional information through our lens about infrastructure, assist in that conversation, elevating that conversation in the region, and then direct queries. And this is kind of, One thing that would also be a benefit, so let's say a jurisdictional staff member didn't know what a water reclamation facility existed for a particular parcel, we could direct them through our information to the appropriate entity contact. I mean, I'm assuming most of them probably know that stuff, but that was just an example. So anyway, back to Jeremy.
Thank you, Chris. Jeremy, again, for the record. So just to kind of sum up, I mean, there's my ridiculous stool graphic that I made, which you see folks do. I got really classic with that one. But I think of the agency having these three legs, right? There's the regulatory stuff that we do at these meetings and that, you know, the projects of regional significance, master plan stuff. That's an incredibly important part of what we're up to. Also, we have really, I think, over the years tried to enhance our data and analytics component, which is another leg of the stool. We see that as a really important part of what regional planning can provide for the region, and it all kind of is in service of that regional coordination piece that Chris was talking about. So that's sort of the way that generally we're thinking about our role and why we think this PIP project will really be a boon for the region. Obviously, I don't think this exists right now. I mean, our understanding is we don't have a document you can go to right now and find all this information. It's certainly in people's heads. I think people do a great job on all of the infrastructure fronts. This is not some sort of attack on anyone or anything like that, but it really, we see it as our role to bring this information together and make sure that it's available. And so that's why we're up against it here. So we think we're going to enhance the understanding of public infrastructure in the Truckee Meadows region, and we're going to have a coalescence and organized set of data that is GIS data, but also CIP data. And then the key is, as Chris mentioned, really to turn the data into actionable information. What are we going to do with it? We're going to use it in our regulatory reviews. We can use it in enhancing our regional policies, and we can use it in sharing with the community and with our partners to coordinate for better planning for the region. We don't know everything, so we needed a little bit of help. And as you know, we went out and asked for a request for qualifications for a consultant to help us, and really specifically to help us on the CIP translation side. Every jurisdiction and entity does the CIP process a little bit differently, and we are not CIP masters. And so we have hired Catherine Hansford Economic Consulting and team to help us with that aspect primarily, but also just to serve as a general, advice counsel for the project. She has a lot of experience here locally and elsewhere in this domain. So we're excited to continue working with Catherine and build up that CIP knowledge. Next, please. There's a lot of chances for folks to engage on the public infrastructure plan. So it says today, but that was actually yesterday. That was at the band meeting, the builders room there, which was well attended. There was probably 40 or 50 folks there. They recorded it. I think it was for APA credit even. So that was kind of neat. We're doing this thing called Lunch and Learns, or maybe TMRPA engagement time. Just hang out with TMRPA. We have the first one next week. I think it's Wednesday at 6 or 5 or something. 5:30, thank you. Yeah, we're advertising that on social media, and it's really going to be very relaxed. Like, folks can just come to the first floor conference room at RTC, and they're going to be just mobbing this place. But we'll just be there to answer questions and be available, and we're going to have several of those throughout the build-up to October of 2024, when we actually try to get the new regional plan adopted. Then we've got this event that Shawnee made this cool graphic for, which we had such a good time last September, and such a great turnout, and we think it was very useful that we thought we ought to make this kind of like an annual event where we go to a park or someplace cool in the region and host just a community event where folks can come, we can get some feedback, we can tell them what we're working on. There'll be prizes. It's going to be really fun. So then also we're going to be presenting a similar presentation, probably evolved a bit from this one, at the Nevada APA conference in October. And in the November-December timeframe, we plan to do some kind of a community conversation like we did recently for our natural resources effort. So those are a lot of ways that folks can engage. And of course, as we can see from the audience tonight, everyone loves to come to our public meetings and engage with these presentations. Next slide, please. So that's it. We're happy to answer any questions and kind of learn any feedback you might have. I don't know that we actually need a motion, but if you wanted to direct us to do something, then that would probably be best in the form of a motion, I suppose.
Thank you. I just have one question. When you guys are looking at infrastructure, are you actually looking at like the aging infrastructure? Are you highlighting that in areas that need redevelopment? Or is that something that the consultant's going to be looking at with the CIPs?
Well, I think that is going to be a function of the CIP work, absolutely. We haven't, right now, we're kind of just getting a handle on, do we have everything that we think is useful? Is the data current? And, are there any gaps? So we want to fill those gaps first. But I mean, I think the CIP, the maintenance component of that, is not in there, right? Because it's not part of the capital improvement process. So I think we'll need to take that under consideration and see how we can factor that in.
I think it's important just because, you have pipes in the ground for 50 years and they all need to be replaced, and a lot of times you get kicked that can down the road until it's too late. So if you can bring that idea to the forefront, that might be a good.
It's a great comment. Thank you very much, Kate.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, so Jeremy, have you said you've reached out to the different entities and are adding this into their annual reports?
Correct, yes.
Has there been any, feedback from them in terms of the level or any differences that they're able to provide as a part of this, or does this seem to be fitting kind of seamlessly into what they were doing already?
Well, I think we want to try to be as seamless as possible and not ask for additional work. We want to just take what folks are already doing. There's different levels of engagement that we've, based on the jurisdiction of the entity in terms of how willing or they are with some pieces of the data or not. I think everyone is willing to share, so that's good. And we are organizing around our next regional plan update working group meeting, where we'll have all the affected entities and jurisdictional staff in the room with Catherine Hansford and team and us, where we're going to lay out what we have and where we think there are gaps, and then hopefully get buy-in from everybody participating in that we will fill all that in, and then come back in like 12 weeks after that and show them what we've done and make sure that we've hit the mark.
And then I guess just to follow up on the chair's comment, I think there is a great sort of maybe gap in terms of what we're doing here, because the information that you're getting is the existing information. And so it would be, as you say, maybe moving on down the road, understanding, yes, maybe there's infrastructure there, sewer, water, but it's not adequate. So trying to capture how that is in this. Again, you're at the macro level, so how far that goes is, I think, somewhat limited, but you may be able to maybe adjust some of the colors in the hexagon as a result of that. And I think that even goes for, I think we had a discussion about how schools fits into this kind of thing, but I think there's a similar situation with schools in terms of working with the school district and their understanding of, the size and the capacity of the schools that they have in a particular area. How many modulars do they have at that school site is an impact on really what the capacity of that area is. So even though it appears that there's a school there, sort of understanding the condition and the status of that, I think may have some impact. But that said, I think this is great. I think this is a wonderful tool. I like the idea of almost that one-stop shop, both for the affected entities and for all of our jurisdictions when they get projects that come in, but even, can't tell you how many requests you get from, just random people looking at a site, like, what can you tell me about the site? It's like having a place to point to that really addresses things that are more germane to what they're looking at than just say the zoning or the master plan, but to say, oh, this is actually adequate. So love to see what is going on here. This is great. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Armstrong, so I'm kind of surprised at how much really goes into this, seeing it kind of at first glance. So it's kind of a two-part question. What makes this data gathering process so difficult? Is it just the fact that there's different jurisdictions with different methodologies of collecting data and so on? And to what extent do you expect this undertaking will maybe streamline that or make it better in the future? Because I would imagine the end result of this, especially if it's on an annual cadence, would actually make some of that data gathering more straightforward and hopefully more accessible into the future.
Yeah, great points and question. I mean, every entity or jurisdiction does it just a little bit differently. Some things are the same. And also, the actual existence of some of these data pieces has been growing over time too. So if it was 10 years ago, we might not have even had some of the things that are available today. So there's that aspect. It's not that it's incredibly, I guess, difficult to get it together. It is getting easier, but there are concerns, about sharing data, especially about public infrastructure, because, there's security risk there. So I think folks want to have confidence in who we are and what we're doing, and that's why we're bringing them into that meeting. And we've gone out, say, like Sun Valley GID, and met in person with the folks out there. And we're really trying to build up for folks an understanding of why we're trying to do this. And I think this hexagon approach, which kind of coursifies the data, if you will, is pretty helpful, because then folks can't pinpoint down and then come back at somebody in like a public meeting setting or anywhere and take them to task. So I think it's getting better for sure, and we're definitely committed. And I think it is that feedback on the annual cadence that will really help both sides of this, whether it's the entity or jurisdiction or how we're doing it as well.
All right, with that, I think we will be finished with general business and move on to reports. Do we have any members or directors' reports?
Madam Chair, I have a short report I'm happy to give. So first off, I just want to appreciate everyone being here this evening, especially all of the alternates and folks that are on their last leg, if you will, for showing up and helping us to achieve the quorum. I really appreciate that very much. Our next meeting is going to be here in this chambers on August 24th at 6 p.m. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the events we've been doing towards the regional plan update for October of 2024. That's our 5-year state statute mandated update. So I mentioned the public infrastructure meeting we're going to have with the regional plan update working group. We already had a kickoff meeting of that team, and it was a great meeting, great engagement. So I'm really looking forward to bringing Catherine Hansford in and getting that data gap analysis ball rolling. We delivered, as Chris mentioned, to the builders yesterday. It was a joint event with also APA, so folks could get credits, and it was well attended. Really cool. I think between the last meeting and this meeting, we also hosted the Natural Resource Community Conversation event at Bartley Ranch. Some of you were there. Thanks for coming. I thought it was great. We had 4 stations where we were able to get feedback on things like our natural resource consideration areas concept, the stuff we did the workshops on, the source water and the trails, as well as the lands bill, which was very interesting to hear about. And we gave a presentation, and I think we got some good ideas from folks too about some directions kind of similar to tonight that we ought to be considering as we move forward with that. So that was really cool. And then I also want to make sure I announce that our natural resource data portal is live. It's been live for since that night, I think, basically. And you can go onto our website and you can search through all the data we gathered with the help from our friends at Cardno that became Stantec. And it's really got some cool features. You can search. It's organized in the same way the Natural Resource Plan is organized. So you can search for data kind of by chapter or by topic, which is kind of neat. So please check that out. It's on our website on the Natural Resource page. And then I already talked about the next week first informal management or engagement opportunity with staff hanging on the first floor conference room. So with that, that concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to 8B, do we have a legal counsel report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Prenti for the record. I only have one item to report on. For anyone who did receive a copy of a letter from legal counsel for charter school interest, I'm just letting you know I will be addressing that with counsel who issued the letter. If you have any concerns or questions that you would like to talk to me about regarding the contents of that letter, please reach out to me directly. Jeremy has my contact information, and we will likely be circling around to that before the August meeting in regards to the points raised. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9, is there any requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, moving on to public comment.
We've received none.
Okay. Written correspondence?
Well, I have shared with you the written correspondence we received quite a bit of regarding the PRS items, which we'll hear in August. But other than that, there's nothing to report.
All right, and we are now at item 12. Do we need action on that? All right, we're done.